today we have an installment in our workshop series. So we frequently have workshops held here at Thales College, touching on various aspects of what a student would want to glean as they develop and grow into virtuous citizens who are going to make impacts in society. So the theme of today is learning through labor, the importance of work experience and tips for success. I won't steal any thunder from our speakers, so I'll leave that to them. My role here is just to introduce our lineup. We have quite a few great speakers here. So this is going to come in 2 installments. Our first will be from Kent Misegades. Kent, in a very real sense, is your stereotypical and idealized engineer. So if you think of engineers as someone who starts things, who initiates new endeavors, innovates, and then builds things, Kent has been starting things and building things for quite a few decades. He is currently the owner and president of Aerosouth Technology, LLC. He also played a pivotal role in the founding of NC TAP, which you will hear about, and it's an apprenticeship organization. And then even here closer to home, he was one of the early developers in Thales Academy, the Apex. Some of you, I know we have someone in the audience at Thales Academy Apex, and then particularly the Letty Institute of Technology program. So if you are enjoying that, you can come and speak with one of the early developers and talk about where it stands today. Kent will take all of those experiences and discuss with you the purpose and benefits of working. So I think Mr. Letty may have some comments before we transition, but then please give Mr. Letty and then Kent your attention, and then we'll transition to our second speaker afterwards. So.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick comments. Throughout grade school, we walked to grade school. It wasn't 5 miles. It was 3/4 of a mile. But along the way, I did learn a lot, and I picked up jobs, including paper routes and many other jobs. And then in high school, I had jobs throughout high school, worked in a drugstore, ditto in college. So the theme is this. We need good theoretical knowledge, and we need to, because we move from good theory to ground. But if we're not well-grounded, we may understand the theory, but it's harder to move to ground. So ideally what we want is individuals that understand the theory and can move it to ground. And the way you do that is you understand physics and mathematics, the human world, but you also have to do things with your hand. And one of the things that does is it builds confidence, both intellectually and physically. So that's our theme. So if you look at captive air systems today, we're using a theory out of Penn State University called DOAS to transform the way HVAC is done. But the theory sits up at the university, and somebody has to convert that to something in the building that actually works. And that's what we want our students to do. So if we keep them on both tracks, some of you know our students now are in 2.5 hours a week of vocational training, our engineering students. And guess what? They love it. They absolutely love it. And they'll gain confidence in this process, and they will learn a myriad of processes over a period of time. So there's nobody that knows more about that than our friend Kent Misegades, so I'm going to welcome Kent Misegades.
Oh. Thank you, Bob. Well, a nice introduction. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me, and also the great organization here from the people here at Thales College. Personally, it's pretty exciting for me to be here. Last time I was here, I was teaching shop classes, and I mentioned if they find any sawdust around the back corners of some of these rooms, it was probably from my students. And we did have a good time. I really enjoyed it. I want to congratulate all of you students that are here at Thales Academy or at Thales College, or contemplating being here. It takes a lot of courage to be in a no-name school, and we saw this through the early Thales Academy. Of course, those schools and those students have gone on to great things. Some of my students now have families and children of their own. But it's important not to confuse the quality of your education with the buildings that you're in. Actually, these are much nicer than my college buildings. But it's a nice place. And there's some examples of that. I remember we had a brother and a sister in our Thales Academy in Apex, which started in a converted lumber yard, or was also known as the flea market. All of us old-timers remember that. A couple of years after they got into the school, their father was transferred to Singapore, and they applied to the best international school in Singapore, and they were readily accepted. They did very well, and the note came back, and they said, well, clearly, these students were well prepared for our curriculum. And I often thought, I wondered what they would have said if they'd seen these students in a converted lumber yard. So again, it goes back to it's the quality. My own father graduated when I was 7 years old from a no-name new engineering college in Los Angeles. You wouldn't recognize the name now, and that's not really important. But he went on to a terrific career as an engineer for General Electric. But he always said that what really helped him was his training as an electrician when he was on a destroyer during the Korean War. And he used those skills all throughout his engineering career. So again, it's that combination. If you go on to start your own business, and hopefully you'll consider that someday, you should know that you'll rarely have a customer who asks you, what college did you attend? Or he'll ask to see your diploma. They don't care. It's all about your products and your services. So people that get hung up on large campuses and fancy diplomas may have their focus in the wrong place. I also wanted to mention that looking at what's happening here at Thales College, and the fact that we're even having this discussion today on why it's important to work while you're in school, it reminds me of a great college. I spent a lot of my career in Germany and Switzerland, called Mittweida. No one's ever heard of Mittweida before. This is a terrific college that required work in the chosen career area, and they produced some terrific graduates that had that great combination. Some of them you will recognize. Hans Balzen, if you ever see Balzen cookies in the store, that's a big German company. He was a graduate. Walter Buch, he invented the PAL format. All of us old-timers remember NTSC and PAL formats for television. August Horch, probably never heard of him, or his little car company, Horscher. People couldn't pronounce it, so he used the Latin form Audi. We know Audi. He was a graduate of the school. Gerhard Neumann, who first his father made him apprentice as an auto mechanic before he let him go to mechanical engineering college. Gerhard Neumann became the founder of General Electric aircraft engines, where one of my sons is head of QA and certification right here in Durham. It's the largest final assembly plant for GE jet engines. But Neumann always said that it was that combination of the skills that he learned as an auto mechanic and the book knowledge and the mathematics that he learned in engineering school that was really the key to his success. Fritz Opel, anyone hear of an Opel car? They used to sell them. It's a division of General Motors. And also, I'm a pilot, a guy by the name of Oskar Ursinius. He was a pioneer in sailplanes, German sailplanes, very famous guy, also built them. Another graduate of Mittweida. And when I look at the emphasis here on the combination of really excellent academics with learning skills, I think often of Mittweida. And it'd be so exciting to see something like that come out of Thales College. I think that would really happen. If you want to read a little bit more about it, there's a great book out there called Hermann the German. This is on the life and history of Gerhard Neumann, who is Americans called him Hermann the German. Fascinating story for anyone interested in becoming a great engineer and all of the adventures that he went through in his life. I can really recommend it. I'm going to show you some slides. I won't show you all of them here because the time permission just won't allow it. And I'll preface that by saying that I'm giving a similar talk next week in a podcast from Classical Conversations. They are the largest Christian homeschool curriculum business, 150,000 students worldwide. They're headquartered near me, and the owners are friends of mine, and they've asked me to talk. So there's some biblical aspects here that I won't dwell on, but the topic is the same. And here we're going to get back to who these people are in the pictures. I always started my classes with definitions. It's so important that we're all on the same playing field. When I talk about various things, it's important that we all agree on definitions. Education, at least the biblical definition is to equip human beings for every good work. And hopefully, whatever you go on to do, ultimately it's good. And, as Thomas Edison once said, I'm only interested in inventing things that people will buy. And people are only going to buy them if they're good, because they're going to exchange the money in their pocket for your good or your service. So it better be good, or you probably won't be successful. Schooling, well, that's what we get here within a building. And I should mention that in the formative years of the United States, most families, if they could afford books, they had two books. They had a Bible, and they had the New England Primeur. The New England Primeur. That was the first textbook used in schools. Over 1 million copies were sold. And it's fun to read this again, especially when you read the level of English that first grade students were capable of in 1777. It's sobering. But that's all people had. And yet, look at all the tremendous things. They took a wilderness and turned it into the world's strongest economy in 2 centuries. Schooling and learning, of course. Learning, I think everyone within Thales, you probably already heard, it doesn't end when you graduate. It should be lifelong, and learning is a lot of fun. I just turned 65. I don't know what the word retirement is. It's a horrible thought to me. Working is learning, learning is working. Industry, of course, we think of industry as places where Mr. Luddy and I work, but industry traditionally really means your energetic devotion to a task or an endeavor, what you do every day. Labor is human activity, and when you learn, if you haven't learned already about Austrian economics, you'll know that one of the most important, essential books that was written by Ludwig von Mises is Human Action. It's a bit of a hard read, but it has to do with our action as human beings and how that influences everything around us. And work is what we do. Also biblical, if you don't work, you don't eat. My generation, that's what our fathers told us. But it is true even today. Our profession is our occupation, might be law, medicine, engineering. Takes a lot of training, and it never ends because it's always changing. I had a great teacher once in high school ROTC, Sergeant Roop, little guy, rough voice. And he said, if you want to be something, you got to act like it. That's what he always say. It took us a while to figure that out. But he said, you got to learn. Figure out how those successful people got to where they are, and then act like it. Repeat what they did. That should be in a profession. The career is the general course of progression of our working life, and it never really ends. Never really ends. Our avocation is our hobby. It's what we do in addition to our work, usually for enjoyment. It's our passion. It's what it is. Every one of you probably knew when you were a child what you liked more than something else. Maybe you liked to cook or sew, or you liked fire trucks. Me, it was airplanes. It was easy. And if you can guide your career in that direction so you're involved with those things, then the old saying comes true that you'll never work a day in your life. There's some drudgery, but not much, if you really chase that passion. The skills are the proficiency, the facility, dexterity that we acquire through training or experience at work or through hobbies. It's how we combine our brains with our fingers to make great things. A little bit more about work. In the Bible, I was kind of curious because that word work really comes up a lot in the Bible and why it's important. You look up the word retire, it's only in there once. It has to do with how long a high priest had his job. And it was a tough job to be a high priest. But even after he retired, he became the assistant to the high priest. So at least biblically, you never really were allowed to retire. This gentleman that most pilots know, he started a business right out of college called Sporty's Pilot Shop. It's the biggest supplier of everything imaginable for pilots. And I met him at a conference some years ago, and he was already probably 70. And I asked him, Hal, aren't you ready for retirement? And he just looked at me seriously. He said, you'll know when I retire when you read my obituary. And you know, that really hit with me. And that's the way I look at it now. Because I enjoy work, and I enjoy my work. Another really good book I can recommend, Noah Webster's Moral Catechism. This is another book that pretty much everyone your age would have read and even memorized 2 centuries ago, and it's as relevant today as it was back then. It's a delightful read, gives some good guidance for life, and I really recommend it. Historically, if you read biblical history, which is an interest of mine, you'll know that 2 millennia ago, and even prior to that, it was the responsibility of parents to provide their children with basic skills so they could survive. That is, they can support a family. Do all of the things that you need to do to support a family. And by and large, people still do that today, but it goes back a long, long time. Helps you to pay. We had this sort of training still in school, and of course, you know, Thales has been a real pioneer in bringing these things back. I was fortunate to play a small role in that, in bringing what I took. All the boys took shop, and I loved it. The girls took home economics. My mother was a home economics teacher, so even as a boy, I learned how to cook and to sew and weave and knit and all those things. I mean, it was just part of our family. We didn't know any different. Our daughter, she taught our daughter how to sew, and she went on to UNC Greensboro on a full scholarship in fashion design. She had plenty of money, but she still went to work at Wrangler. Wrangler hired her after college, sent her to Kansas City to Lee, where she did children's clothing. Walmart hired her away. And so if you buy any shoes at Walmart, she's in charge globally. And she would tell you the reason for her success was she learned how to sew as a 10-year-old girl. She brought the skills that the other students didn't have and the insight into that. There are some other things you can read. These will be available to you, just some other personalities that, fortunately today, a lot of people realize that this was a mistake to remove skills training from education. There's a lot of great efforts, one of them from Mike Rowe. He's been very active in that. And they're bringing his show back, by the way, The Dirty Jobs. I love that. Great show to watch. On your own, since you've got a nice, I would normally do this if I had more time. I always did this on the first day of my classes with LIT. I'd say, I want to know what your hobby is, and I want to know what your career goal is. If you're in Germany or in Switzerland, as a 9th grader, if you don't know that, you're in trouble, because the high schools vary depending upon the career path you want to go. And to tell me, well, your career is, your goal is to go to college and earn lots of money, that's not a career. Think about that and test each other when you get a chance. It's sometimes interesting to hear what people say. Let's see. See if you can identify these people. Well, this is a gimme. This is, of course, Jesus Christ being taught as a carpenter. Anyone know who this is? Very good. His first career was a surveyor at age 16. He earned money from it because he was good in math. We always think of him as a soldier, a statesman, politician, but he was good in math. And that led to a paying job as a teenager. Who's this fellow? Any guess? It's a tough one. Benjamin Franklin. That's right. Started his apprenticeship for his brother as a printer at age 12. Tough apprenticeship, really tough. By the age of 40, he was so successful he didn't need to work anymore because of his inventions and his business prowess. Anybody know these fellows? High school students? Bill Gates, Paul Allen, they were in their high school computer club, and they turned it into a business. What college did they get their degrees from? Anybody know? Dropouts. They didn't finish college. I'm not saying do that. They were ahead of the curve so much in computing, they couldn't learn anything anyway. How about this fellow? High school teenager, good-looking kid. I'm sure you know who he is. Jeff Dunham, ventriloquist. Already in high school, he made, and he still does today, he makes all of his own puppets, skills that he taught himself. And he's a ventriloquist and comedian. But he does all of his own work himself. He's also built several helicopters that he flies. This is actually local to home. You wouldn't know this. This is the company Schunk in Morrisville. They're the world's leading producer of grippers that go on the end of robotic arms. Their U.S. headquarters are in Morrisville. They were members in our apprenticeship program. And these are probably third-year apprentice apprentices in their program. And their apprenticeship program here is identical to Germany. So when they finish it here, their certificate is honored in Germany and vice versa. One of the young fellows that I admire so much that lifetime learning was Glenn Hammond Curtis. His father died when he was young. His sister was born deaf, and they needed the money for special training. So he took a job to deliver for Western Union telegrams. Well, back then, you would be paid for every telegram that you delivered. Well, he was pretty smart. He said, if I had a bicycle, I could beat the competition. So he did that, and he became very fast on a bicycle. He became a competitive cyclist. He was in a club. The club put the money up for him to open a bike shop to repair their bicycles. Then he was very innovative, and he came out with his own line of bicycles. Was successful before he was 20 years old. He was a real addict of speed, so he said, well, let's hang an engine on it. And he needed a light, powerful engine, so he just developed his own engine. It's a V8 engine with aluminum heads on it. That engine turned out to be ideal for airships and early airplanes, so he got into the airplane business. Curtis, and then later Curtis Wright. And we know him, at least pilots know him for aircraft like the P-40. But it all goes back to helping pay the family bills as a teenage boy. And it's amazing what life can lead to. I mentioned George already. Great history. He was also an inventor. Most people don't know. He invented quite a few products. He was a land investor. He was a very interesting person, of course, very innovative on his farm if you ever go up to Mount Vernon. Another one of my childhood idols, I was born in Los Angeles, lived there until I was almost 8. And of course, everybody knew about Hobie. He was self-taught. He made the first low-cost surfboards in the United States. He pioneered the use of foam and fiberglass for composites to lower the cost so that more people could buy his surfboards. And then eventually got into making catamarans. And anyone that sails has probably heard of a Hobie cat. Well, that was all his invention. Started out as a teenager carving surfboards in the family garage in Los Angeles. Great history, very innovative engineer. He was just so good at what he did, he didn't need to go to engineering college, but he surrounded himself with people that had. Another fellow here, aviation from Los Angeles, this is a young Burt Rutan. He was a champion in model aircraft, and his models just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. He got a degree in aerospace engineering, worked in flight tests for the Air Force, and then eventually went on to develop over 100 advanced aircraft. This is one of them with Richard Branson. That people can pay money and go up in that thing. But it all started from his hobby in model aircraft. I'm not going to dwell a whole lot on this, except to mention that in looking at what we would call dual education, so combining work and studies, in my mind at least, the country that really has done the best on this is Switzerland. I worked there. In fact, I just came back from there. I was there through last week. Their dual education program, if you look that up, there's a lot of English language literature on that, on the dual education. Basically, it says you can enter at any point in their system and arrive at any point. So you could start as a 16-year-old apprentice and then end with a PhD. In fact, I met a fellow. He did exactly that. He started out as a machinist at age 16 and eventually earned a PhD. He's now lead engineer for Siemens globally on their gas and steam turbines. He's over here in the US quite a bit. But he started as an apprentice. So the Swiss system, there's really no dead ends on that. Little caveat to that, if you're over in Europe, of course, you're not going to always get by with just one language. If you don't already have knowledge of a foreign language, you really should acquire it. And not just for engineering. So many great global companies. They may not require you to learn their language, but it's going to be a big advantage if you do. I come from Alabama, so I learned English, sort of. I went to Europe, I didn't speak anything. We didn't have a foreign language requirement, but I managed to learn passable French, and then we've spoken German at home ever since, 41 years. And that really has helped me tremendously in my career. I'm not going to show this video just for time, but it's linked to it. It's all in German. But you can figure it out. It shows the building blocks for the Swiss dual education. Part of this is apprenticeships. We're not going to talk about this here. This really starts at the high school level. That's one way to gain that. It's one way. And the NCTAP program is one that I've been involved with here. The other side of that is what we're really talking about here. Over in Europe, they call this a duale studium, but it's existed here for many years, called co-op education. I paid for my undergraduate degree. I studied nuclear engineering, nuclear mechanical at NC State. I didn't have any money, and my parents didn't have it. There was no such thing as college loans back then, at least not that I was aware of, in 1975. But my last year of college, 1 year of tuition and fees was $660 for 1 year. That was a lot of money back then. So the co-op program really appealed to me. I enjoyed it tremendously. We would alternate semesters of study and work. I worked 2 semesters for Bechtel Power at the time, one of the biggest nuclear power plant companies in the world. That was up in Maryland. And then I spent another semester working for a German machine tool company in Detroit, Michigan, which was very interesting. Learned a lot of lessons there. And so co-op is a great, great program. Whether you do it like I did, alternating, or whether you do it, in the afternoons, or you do it in the summer, it really doesn't matter. The point is that you're acquiring additional skills and networking with people in areas that are related to what you're doing. Like our daughter did working at Wrangler while she was at college. Boom, she even met her future husband there. So, that's just, so many great things came out of that. There are some good examples right around here, and I've talked to the professors here about this. Any company that does apprenticeships at the high school level probably also is interested in college interns, because there are different levels to do these sort of things. And that's why I recommend looking at them. Here's where I would look. Certainly any company with a headquarters in Switzerland, Germany, or Austria, because those are the ones where 70 to 80% of all their employees come in through an apprenticeship program. About half of those go back and get advanced degrees in college that are paid by their employer. That's how it's done over there. But they have a culture and a mindset already that's part of. They see workforce development as their responsibility. And so you probably have a better chance. The program that I helped start, NCTAP, that's around here, it's based on Apprenticeship 2000. This was started by a group of Swiss, Austrian, and German companies in the Charlotte area. There's another big program now in the Triad, Guilford County, called GAP. There's one near me in Asheboro, Catawbas, and Hickory. Any of these programs, they'll always have the list of the employers on them. And you probably have a pretty good chance that if you go there and say, hey, I know what you do over in Germany and Austria, they're probably going to be open to that. Not just for engineering jobs. Apprenticeships and dual studium can be applied to any profession. And so that's where I would look. And I'm not just biased because it's Germany. I think you'll find that they're open to that. South Carolina also is very strong in this area. They have a website, apprenticeship.com. Our 2 states, actually, I would say we lead the nation in these sort of programs, thanks to some of these European companies that have really pioneered how do you adapt those programs to the U.S., because things are a little bit different here. And they've done a good job of it. We get good support from our community colleges on that. Just for fun, if you get a chance, study what the Amish and the Mennonites do. They all came out of northern Switzerland, where the apprenticeship program was big. They've continued doing that. About 2/3 of them own their own businesses, and then the other third are farmers. And so that combination of book learning and skill learning and entrepreneurship is very strong within the Amish and the Mennonite community. And there's some that you may not even recognize. If you've ever had Smucker Jam, Jam Smucker was a Mennonite. Carl Stoltzfus, we know him. Dynamic Aviation is a big aircraft-related business in Virginia. Dwight Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, comes from a Mennonite family. Kraft Foods, the founder, James Kraft, Milton Hershey. Anyone like chocolate? Or if you've ever seen Auntie Annie's Pretzels, she's a Mennonite. So often they've been doing these things, they brought it with them from Switzerland. They're good to study how they do things. Whether you want to be a Mennonite or not, I mean, that's irrelevant. It's just that how they've been able to do this. And typically they only go through the 8th grade, formal education. But they learn things from other ways. Mennonites do, though, typically go on to college. I'm going to leave some other slides there for you to read on your own. This is sort of our own history. My wife is from Germany. She apprenticed for, in fact, a highway construction company in business. She could even go out to a quarry today and tell you about rocks. She learned that so well. Our daughter, I mentioned already, and our 2 sons, they're car nuts, so they were racing cars in high school. And they both went and apprenticed as aircraft mechanics after high school, but then gone on to other things. Our younger son's employer, GE, they wanted him in management, so they paid for his degree at Embry-Riddle down in Florida. And now he's, how old is he? 32, 33. He's got the world by the tail. Lifetime learning. So in closing, I don't read a whole lot of books on business management unless they're written by people that actually did it. One, obviously, and I'm just plugging because the author's standing here. If you haven't read that, shame on you. It's a tremendous book on the history of Mr. Luddy's businesses and all the problems that he faced and how he overcame them, but also how Thales came to be what it is today, and just some really great lessons for future leaders. Really recommend it. This is something I read when I was in college. We actually worked with him through a program I was in there in leadership. It's still a timeless little booklet, and it just kind of helps you sort out your thoughts about where am I going in life. And if you're out of college and you still don't know, something's wrong. So I recommend that. I gave it away to my students and to my children. In closing here, I think it should be pretty obvious to you that all of us that are lifetime learners, we enjoy what we do. It doesn't end when you're in college. College was important to us, but it was kind of the start. And if you just keep plugging away and keep those goals in front of you, you'll eventually reach them. My goal has always been, I've been flying since I was 15, my goal was always, I'd really like to design and build my own airplanes. And fortunately, through a friendship with an outstanding designer of aircraft, that's what my little company is gearing up to do, is to produce 2 different types of light aircraft down in Moore County. At least, God willing, that's kind of our goal. But we're getting there. We're developing our skills. We'll do our own workforce training in-house through apprenticeships, and then we have some really great engineers helping us on that. You just keep plugging away, and eventually you're going to get there, I'm sure. And that's all I had to say.
So we'll transition briefly. This is your chance to get a sip of water, but we'll move quickly to our next speaker, and then hold the Q&A at the end. While we're transitioning, I should mention that Kent advocated for the benefits of work and many opportunities that you could pursue here locally for that. I would mention that here at Thales College, we are trying to implement these ideals in a very unique way. So there's many interesting facets of what we do, one of which is that our students are in college for 3 terms out of the year, so you complete your degree in less than 3 years. You start in August of 1 and then end by May the 3rd. And all of the classes are completed by noon of each day. So the afternoons are completely free, Monday to Friday, and the intent of that is for our students to have the opportunity to have a consistent work schedule, either for various jobs or, as we're hoping to transition with our current group of students by this summer and fall, into a formal internship relationship. So we are working with several companies in the area with a goal of creating year-long and maybe even 2-year-long internships to create and bolster a relationship between student and employee that has long-term benefits for both. One small way that we're already seeing fruit of this is that our engineering majors are going off to the manufacturing facility through Captivair in Youngsville every week for 3 hours a week, and they are learning various technician and engineering tasks. So everything from driving forklifts to crimping wire and wiring up control panels, welding, all of those skills are being implemented. In the first year, of an engineering program, and we're looking to develop similar modules for both our business and classical education majors. Now, I would also add, as a last aside, in the first term, our students take what's called a Life and Career Dynamics course, and then in this term, the Mindset of the Entrepreneurial Master. So you can ask about this course with my colleague, Dr. Peter Forrest here, and those courses are designed to give students the ethos of being a leader, of being a go-getter in business, to capture these internships and to thrive in them. So all of those practical, down-to-earth skills about how to be a go-getter in these areas are part of the college experience here at Thales College. Now, and character, of course, yes. I should let the instructor speak to his course rather than myself. Whether you come here and pursue those aims or go elsewhere, this next talk will be a benefit to you. So our next speaker is Alexander Guin. He holds a JD from the Norman Adrian Wiggins School of Law from Campbell University. He has worked in many places, so in the nonprofit sector since 2010. He's worked in public policy in D.C., and then has worked in various fundraising roles here in North Carolina broadly. So with his vast and broad experience, he has various tips that you will find helpful in networking, in those skills of landing these internships and many more. So I invite Alexander to come up. Please give him your attention.
Thank you, Philip. Well, I'll try and, it is a, thank you. Yeah, that's great. It is an honor to be here. So I was in the first graduating class of St. Thomas More Academy, which is one of the early Luddy schools, and this was back when my high school had 35 students in the whole school, and I graduated with a class of 10. So, so it's great to be here today. I want to talk about some really practical. Try and give you some practical advice about finding internships and finding early jobs and kind of why they're important. And first, I want to start off with a few questions. So by show of hands, who, and I'm really talking to the high school and college students here, who knows what they want to do when they grow up or knows what career they want? Raise your hand if you know exactly what you want to do. Okay, I have a couple very timid hands up. Okay, except maybe one. All right, let me ask another one. By show of hands, how many people, how many in this room have had an internship, paid or unpaid? Okay, so we got a couple again. All right, now how many have had a job, a part-time or full-time job? Okay. All right, so the next time I'm here, which maybe it'll be, next month or something, everybody's hand should be up. An internship or a part-time job or a full-time job. I say this because it's easy to see why this is important when you look at our job market. So if you look at the U.S. job market right now, we've got historically low unemployment, like 3.5%, I think, which means that there's about, if you believe the numbers, which they're pretty skewed, is about 5.7 million people looking for work. But there's 11 million open jobs right now. So if every single person that was looking for a job today got a job tomorrow, by Sunday there'd still be 5.3 million open jobs. This is creating a really difficult situation for employers. And on top of the actual labor shortage, there's a skills gap where people do not have the skills that the marketplace demands right now. And you, as high school and college students, are in an excellent position to start building your resume and building the skills you need to be able to fill the jobs that are plentiful and out there today. And I think this skills gap is going to persist. I mean, the employment situation might change, but that gap is going to persist for years. So I want to talk a little bit about this. So one of the things that I do for my clients in my consulting business is personnel searches. And so nonprofits and businesses hire me to find talent. And the reason they hire me is not because I've got some some secret formula or some private database where I've got everybody that can apply to every position. It's because hiring people is incredibly difficult, and finding good employees is very, very tough. What this means, though, is the flip side of that challenge is that it's really easy to stand out. And the way you stand out is by showing that you have a track record of success in your work and in internships and jobs that prove to employers that you can step in and do the job without having to be babysat every day. So I'm going to talk from two different perspectives. One is on the kind of the job seeker side of things, and then one's on the employer side. Because when I'm hiring for my clients, I get lots and lots of resumes, and so I have the opportunity to see so many examples of really excellent resumes and really excellent interviewers, and I also get the chance to see really terrible resumes. And I want to give you some pointers on how to avoid this as you're seeking internships and early jobs. So one of the great things about early jobs and getting internships and apprenticeships like Kent was talking about is that each work experience that you have is going to help shape your idea of the career that you want or the job that you want. And this is true even if all you learn from that internship is that you never want to do that job again. And I want to give you a little example of this. So when I was in early college, and Mr. Luddy knows this, for a little while I thought I wanted to be a dentist. And so I call up, and of course, why not? Dentists make good money, and they apparently they only work 4 days a week, and you're always going to need. There's never going to be a time when you don't need a dentist. So it's pretty recession-proof. So I thought, okay, well, this sounds pretty good. So I call up but I wanted to know for sure. So I call up our family dentist. I said, hey, I'm interested in your career and interested in maybe being a dentist. Could I come in and shadow you, and maybe even after that, intern with you? And he said, sure, yeah, absolutely, come on. So the next week, I put on a suit. I showed up to this dental practice at 7 o'clock in the morning. And for the next 5 days, I followed around my dentist and watched him put his fingers in everyone's mouth about 200 times a day. And not that many times a day, but, I didn't become a dentist. But I did learn quite a few things. I mean, I learned about, I saw how this dentist interacted with his many, many staff. I saw how he interacted with patients and his manner and who are his customers. But I discovered, that routine dental care is, at least for me, extraordinarily boring. And that becoming a dentist was going to be incredibly expensive. And that running a dental practice and being your own boss, which I wanted to do at one point, is very stressful. And so it's not, all roses and sunshine that I thought it would be. So I went a different direction. But my point is that by taking the initiative to get some early experience in a job that interests you, it's going to shape how you approach the career that you want. So how do you find a job or an internship as a high school or college student? I think the easiest way for me to tell this is to start with this statistic. About 85% of all jobs, not just internships, but 85% of all jobs are filled through networking, not through a job listing and sending a cold application. But what the heck is networking? Networking, I think, is just, I don't even really know what that word means. I think it means, I think it's sort of a jargony term that some consultant came up with at some point. But really what it means is finding opportunities from within the group of people that you already know. So who do you know? What are the opportunities that exist there? And leveraging the relationships that you have to find opportunities. So first, when you're looking for a job, when you're looking for an internship, prioritize paid work first. So if you have the opportunity, if you have the choice between being, a paid position that may be a little bit off, off what you're hoping, and an unpaid internship, prioritize the paid one. Obviously, it's great to be paid. You take your internship more seriously when you're paid, and your boss takes your internship more seriously when they're paying you. They're more likely to give you meaningful work. So prioritize paid positions. Here's how I would go about networking. So if you want to find a job through networking, this is my step-by-step approach. Figure out generally what you want to do. So if there's something that you really like, a position or a job that you really want to have, figure that out, right? So you want to be I don't know, you want to be an engineer, you want to be a doctor, you want to be in sales, you want to have your own business, that sort of thing. Then make a list. Sit down and actually make a list of all the people you know that are in that field. Everybody that you know. Ask your parents, who do they know? Who are the people that your parents know that might be in this field? And then what you're going to do is get their contact information and send them an email. Send them an email and ask them, introduce yourself, and say, hey, I'm really interested in your job as a career. I'm really interested in your business. Would you be willing to sit down with me and tell me about what you do and give me some guidance? It is very hard for very few people that are professionals are going to say no to that. If someone comes to you, if someone came to me and said, I really am interested in what you do, will you sit down with me and tell me more about it and give me your advice? And why? Because everybody loves to give advice. They love to feel like they've got something to offer. Okay, so take advantage of that. Take advantage of wanting to learn from people and go sit down with them. So once you start to generate meetings from this, I don't suggest that you go and you say, oh, I really want a job. I really want an internship. You bring questions to them about their career. Why do you like what you do? What do you think what do you think I should do if I want to be successful in what you do? And then after you've had this meeting and you've laid the groundwork, you know this person, follow up right away. Thank them for for taking the time to visit with you. And then if you can, immediately after, within a day, send a handwritten thank you note. That person, if you send someone a handwritten thank you note, they're going to remember you pretty much forever. Yes. So send them a note, and then, first of all, what you've done is you've laid the groundwork for any future internships or any future jobs that might pop up for this person. So when a job pops up, they're going to think about you. They're going to think about that kid that came and sat down with them and gave them and asked good questions and followed up with them and sent a handwritten note. They're going to remember you, and they're going to reach out to you. But what you can also do is, a couple weeks down the road, you follow up with them and you say, you know what, I've been thinking about our conversation. I love the advice you gave me, and I'm wondering if there are any opportunities in your business. Do you have any internships? Do you have I want to learn as much as I possibly can. And I would bet you dollars to donuts that if you do this consistently and you're reaching out to people that are professionals, you'll ultimately be able to land internships, and you'll be able to land part-time jobs. And these develop over time. So take advantage of this time now to build those relationships and lay the groundwork for your future career. Another thing I want to mention is that this is something I never really did, but if you have an idea of what you want to do, who you want to be when you grow up, go online and look at job postings. Look at job postings of jobs that you really want. Once you find one, look at the requirements section. Look at the qualifications and requirements. You're probably going to find that there's this certification required, this sort of experience required, and there's going to be a list of things. Let those requirements drive your part-time job and internship search. So if you want to be in this position, and you know that you're going to be ready to take a job in that field in 3-4 years, well, work backwards from there and say, okay, what do I need to do now to position myself for the job that I want 3 or 4 years from now? So focus your internship search and your job search on filling those job requirements. I mentioned before that I do a lot of personnel searches for clients, and I'm going to shift a little bit to the employer side and what I see with resumes coming in, and just give you some advice on approaching the job search from the employer perspective. It is always incredibly obvious when someone has work experience, and it stands out. So a candidate that has professional experience, especially paid experience, is going to stand out far more than someone with say a degree in the related field. If I'm hiring for a position, I would I'm sure Mr. Luddy would agree with me on this, I think I've even heard you say it, that if there's somebody that has a track record of success in their field, let's say they're a teacher, right? And they've proven that they're a good teacher over 3 or 4 years of teaching. And then they're compared with somebody who's got a master's degree in education or master's degree in teaching, but no work experience. You're going to take the person with work experience because they're a proven commodity. And this happens all the time, that when I'm looking at resumes, somebody thinks that just because they've got a degree in a particular field, that they're the right fit for the job. Well, I'm going to take the person with experience every time. So use this time now to try and get that relevant work experience. So, from the this is really kind of nitty-gritty practical stuff. So when you find a position that you're ready to apply for, and talk about your resume. The worst thing, I get resumes sometimes. I can never believe this. I got a resume the other day from a young man, very nice guy, and I think he's a smart guy, but he's 1 year out of college. Okay, he's 1 year out of college, and he's had one paying job. Okay, his resume was 5 pages long. 5 pages long. So I get this resume, and I think, it took you 5 pages to tell me about your weeks and weeks of work experience? So don't do that. don't do that. Your resume should be max 2 pages, and that's probably even too long. 1 page is more. My resume is 1 page, and I've been working for 15 years, and I had 10 jobs before I graduated from college. So 1 page resume. The other thing about your resume is, don't list the things that you did. This same guy that I was just talking about, I should just put his resume up. It was great. One of the things that he listed on the resume as a positive that would make me and my client want to hire him was, I attended meetings of such and such groups. And that was it. I attended meetings. Well, I don't care. I don't care that you attended meetings. That doesn't tell me anything about your skills. That doesn't help, tell me whether you're the right fit for the job. Now, this was a fundraising job that I was hiring for, but later on in his resume, I saw that it was at the very bottom in small type. He said, at that same position where I told you I had attended meetings, I also was a canvasser, and I visited 6,500 houses in 4 months, or in 5 months. I exceeded the 4,000 house goal, and I had a 60% completion rate. And he barely even mentioned it. It was way at the bottom. But so you focused on telling me about the meetings you went to, and you didn't say this incredible statistic. So what you need to focus on in your resume is outcomes, not outputs. Nobody cares about what you did that didn't produce anything for the business, because you're not that special. You need to show what you accomplished, what you delivered in terms of outcomes. So if you've had a job experience, you need to really drill down on what you've accomplished. So let me just a few more notes on this sort of interview process, or this job search process. Cover letters, communications with potential employers. Exercise the phrase "to whom it may concern" from your vocabulary. Do not, you should never have to use this, "to whom it may concern." You want to be approaching a person. And it's 2023. You can find the person that is hiring for your role. I cannot tell you how often from experienced professionals I get emails saying, "to whom it may concern." My name is my email address. And that should never happen. So figure out who you're talking to and address it to a person. And by the way, if you can't find the person, pick up the phone and call the company and say, "Who's the person that receives your resumes?" And they'll tell you. And you include that, and that makes such a difference. It tells me that you've gone the extra mile, you've taken the effort, and that you're you care about making this you're willing to be serious and work. Yeah. So interviews. If you get an interview, and if you do what I told you in terms of networking and sit down with people, you'll get interviews. Most initial interviews are by Zoom nowadays, and Zoom is a total minefield. But you need to treat Zoom interviews and any Zoom calls just like you would if you were sitting there in person. Okay, so show up early, sit up straight, make sure there's not a bunch of crap in the background of your office. Making eye contact is always an important tip that people give, but you can't really make eye contact in Zoom because if I'm looking at your eyes on my computer screen, they think I'm looking at, a little, I'm writing an email or something. So what you have to do to trick this, you got to look directly into the camera. You look directly into the camera lens, and it makes it look like you're making eye contact with them, at least that you're laser focused on what they're saying. Makes a big impression. For all you high schoolers and college students, use sir and ma'am. You will stand out. Yes, sir, yes, ma'am, until you're told otherwise. And most people will say, oh, you don't have to do that. Call me such and such. Never call someone by their first name. I don't even call people by their first name until I'm given permission. Unless someone says, you can call me John, I say Mr. Smith. And the reason is, your name is one of the most precious things to you. And just because you happen to introduce yourself doesn't mean that you have the right to call someone by their first name. So you treat them with respect and show them by calling them Mr. such and such, Mr. And sir and ma'am. And that will make you stand out markedly from everybody else that's seeking a position. The other thing is, Dale Carnegie, who wrote, what's the book? How to Win Friends and Influence People. Great book, by the way. One of the things he says is, one of the most beautiful sounds to anybody is the sound of their own name. So once you've been given permission to use someone's name, use it often. So that's enough on interviews. But I do want to say one more thing about that process. The people who are persistent and follow up are more likely the people that are going to be successful. So if you've got an interview, you should follow up within an hour. I should see an interview. If you interview with me, I expect that you're going to follow up and thank me for the interview and thank me for the opportunity. And then I expect to see an email from you or a note from you within a week that says, I love this opportunity. Please, can we talk again? Can I give you more information? You want to be following up and not wasting any time on it, because most people don't follow up. Most people go into an interview, they do it, and they forget about it. If you're the squeaky wheel, you're much more likely to get hired. Okay, so I want to I'm going to make one more comment about this, and then I'll close up. But if you get hired in a part-time job, let's say you get a job this summer. Summer jobs are some of the best ways to learn and to stand out. But as a high school student, as a college student, it is so easy to stand out. It's so much easier than you think, because there are very few people who are willing to be humble and show up early, be willing to stay late, not feel like they're entitled to a big salary, and be willing to really do anything on the job. So it's those sorts of things. It's harder to do that when you're in a higher position. I think you can still do it, obviously, but as a young person, it really makes an incredible impression. So this summer, when you're working in an internship or when you're working a summer job, no matter what the summer job is, you should be the number one employee. Everybody should be thinking of you as, Johnny on the spot, as the person who's always willing to work a little bit harder, always willing to go the extra mile, because that guy that's the CEO that sees you busting your hump every day, he's going to be willing to write you a recommendation, or he's going to be willing to hire you down the road. One of the when you take on internships and you take on work experience early, it puts you so far ahead of your competition. And more importantly, it gives you the skills that you need to perform well in your field. And I want to give you one example. So Philip mentioned that I have a JD, and I also practice law. I went to law school, and one of the things I studied was criminal law. And in criminal law, part of what I learned was that if you're going to be convicted of a crime, the state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, you've all heard this before, beyond a reasonable doubt, that you committed the actus reus of the crime. That's the thing the physical act that you have to do. But then that you also had the mens rea, the requisite intent to commit a crime. And I also know that the state has to prove every element of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. So I know those things, right? Now, after I get out of law school, if somebody walked into my office and handed me a speeding ticket, I would say, I had no idea what to do. And the reason is that the theoretical knowledge, the academic knowledge of how to defend someone, or of understanding what the law is very different from defending someone in court. I don't know what forms to fill out to deal with their traffic ticket. I don't know where to stand in the courtroom when the judge calls my name. I don't know which box to pick up their ticket from and what to say to the DA and how I'm going to respond to the judge when he asks a question. Now, if I had skipped law school and I had gone to internship with a criminal defense firm for 2 weeks, I would have learned that like that. Now, obviously, you can't do it without the law degree, but the point is that you can pick up those essential skills. Law is kind of unique in this way that you almost learn nothing about practicing law in law school. So you've really got to have practical experience. But there's some of this is true in every profession. So that practical skills are going to be really important. All right, so I'm going to close with a short little story that comes from Mike Rowe that I really like. One of the things he likes to talk about is not following your passion. He says, you've been given horrible advice. Don't follow your passion. Because just because you're passionate about something doesn't mean you're any good at it. And just because you like to do something doesn't mean that it's a viable career option. He says, instead, follow opportunity. So where opportunities arise, pursue them aggressively and bring your passion with you. The story he tells is that he was once talking to a very successful septic tank cleaner, multimillionaire who had many different locations and lots of employees. And he said, what's the secret to success? And this septic tank cleaner said to him, he said, well, when I was getting started, I looked at where everyone was headed and I went the opposite way. And he said, then I got good at my work. And then I began to prosper. And then one day I learned that I was passionate about other people's crap. So take this opportunity to get some early experience and use the connections that you have, and follow opportunity. Don't just follow your passion. Thanks very much.
All right, so now we transition to a brief Q&A session. And we're going to open the floor to the audience for a little bit. We'll be respectful of your time. It's getting close to lunch, but I'll pass the mic if anybody has any questions, and then maybe you two could stand. And I think
sure.
the wireless will. Any questions?
Any questions?
Yes. As a student at Thales College, I wanted to do my absolute best academically, but there seems to be a very large trade-off between succeeding academically and doing well in an internship. It seems like you have to give, with your limited resource of energy and talent, either more to one or more to the other. How have you balanced school and work?
Kent, you want me to? Well, I can. I did.
I'm older than you.
Yeah, go ahead. You go first.
Well, I mean, in my day, we didn't worry about that because I needed the money. So if I wanted to keep my job, I just did the best I could. I think I learned pretty quickly that you can survive on 4 hours of sleep a night and still work hard. I learned the virtue of a 15-minute nap during the day. And I always knew that eventually it was going to be over. And I was alone. I mean, questions. You just stick it out, suck it up, as they said,
Yeah.
and do your best. I did very well academically also, and I think I did a pretty good job in my various odd jobs that I did.
So I just reread this book recently, The Curmudgeon's Guide to Getting Ahead. It's fantastic.
Great.
One of the things that Murray said in it said something about how a 20-something-year-old was worried about living a balanced life. And his answer was, what kind of 20-year-old wants a balanced life? So I went to law school part-time over a 5-year period, and I had 3 children and a full-time job.
Wow.
And so that was a fair bit of pressure, but it really does come down to finding the time. And if that means getting up early in the morning, if that means staying up late at night, sometimes, obviously you want to try and get sleep where you can, but sometimes you got to sacrifice those things. So I would say time management is really key, and you want to be treating both your school and your internships like a job. I mean, if you think about it, if you've got 40 hours a week, which is a very light schedule, 40 hours a week, and can you fit? Let me ask you: could you fit all your schooling and your internship into 40 hours a week?
Not because of the class structure at Thales College. I was offered a 40-hour internship, but
Wow.
Oh, that's
I
great.
was not
That's
able
great.
to do it because of classes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
It's hard to do a full-time internship when you're in
tough.
school. Yeah,
It's tough.
sure. Yeah, I think you do the best you can, and sometimes for a semester, sometimes you really have to grind, and I think that's the best advice that I can.
Yeah, I mean,
that I can give
industry,
them.
you can generally pick up second and third shift work because people don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Second shift starts around 3 in the afternoon till 11 or 12 at night. And there's 168 hours in the week, okay? So, that's 4 full-time jobs. I always told my children that. What are you whining about? You got 168 hours. And they had no problem staying up till 2 a.m. doing, goofy stuff. So we did this is back in the 70s, we had a group of us in nuclear engineering, which was a challenging program. We stayed up every Thursday night. That was just what we did. Thursday night was an all-nighter. All the exams were on Fridays, so we helped each other. We learned how to drink coffee to stay awake, and I enjoyed those. I mean, I enjoyed that, and I think the other thing was to balance. Most of us, we were fairly athletic, so staying in good shape, that helps a lot too.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah.
Anybody
balance.
else?
And it's going to prepare you when you have children. You're not going to sleep anyway.
That's
I was going to add something. I wish I had gotten your tips on resumes 40 years ago. It was just great. I was going to say a couple little anecdotes to that. One was how my father always recommended resumes. So many resumes today don't tell you anything about a person's character. And so what he always says, I get a lot of resumes at GE. He says, first of all, use legal size paper so it sticks out of the stack. Use off-white color like beige or blue so, your resume is just going to stick out. And when he remembers, it's a pretty sharp kid. Where was that resume? He's got it in his hand. Always include an up-to-date color picture of yourself, like on a passport. My kids were taught, oh, no, don't use a picture. Include things in your activities, your jobs, your hobbies that are related to the career. I had once a resume from someone with a great GPA from an engineering college, and he just said, well, I'm your gift. Here I am. And I read the resume, and where his real passion was, he was a competitive swimmer. All of his activities were in swimming. I basically said, why are you pursuing engineering? It's very clear you want to make a living out of swimming and nautical stuff. Last little anecdote to this is, especially when you're starting out, humans always have the capacity to really mess things up if they don't know what they're doing. So typically in a job, they're going to put you somewhere where you can't screw things up. In industry, it's always, you put them at the loading dock, and they can probably push a crate onto a truck or sweep the floor. Not always. Normally they can't. And then you move them upstream, and so they're getting involved in more complex things. You got to prove yourself sweeping the floor first. If you can't even do that, they're probably not going to keep you on. So the other trick is ask everyone around you, what's the job nobody wants? That's the one I want. Because instantly you become valuable to the company. Our youngest, nobody wanted to do QA, quality assurance, in jet engines. It's kind of critical. It's because it can be monotonous, and if you stop the assembly line because there's a part, suddenly people aren't getting all their overtime that they want. And so it's not a real popular job, but he did it because he knew that it was a critical aspect. He was the one that they said, we want you, we're going to pay for your degree, $40,000 plus a year at Embry-Riddle so that you can go into management. And now he's looking good at that because he took on the worst job. The other way, network's really critical. My kids all got their jobs through my pilot friends. When we came back from Germany in '96, I joined a local flying club, and I asked them, what job does nobody want? Oh, newsletter editor. Nobody wants to do that. I'll do it. And because of that, you instantly meet everyone, and you meet professionals in that also that open doors for you, they open doors for your kids, and we still do that. We all help each other and our children. So look for those jobs either nobody wants at your internship or at your job, or look for a club or an association that is aligned with your career. Mises is a great example. Mises Institute has a very rich program for young students in economics, and all kinds of opportunities. When you go to their conferences, they're the ones that are helping out to run the conference. Man, I mean, you open doors that way so quickly, and you'll get noticed. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, Murray says in this book, what is it? The unentitled shall inherit the earth. So the people willing to do those small jobs are the ones that are going to really prosper in the future. Sure.
That's so true.
So I did my education in the 90s, engineering, then came down here, did my MS. So I totally, understand the philosophy, present yourself in the best way you can. So you will be having a good visibility, right? Mm-hmm. So visibility matters and good visibility sells. Now, for me, as of now, there's too much of influence of technology everywhere. Like it has become a part of our day-to-day routine. So how does a youngster between 15 to 25, how does their personal skills, stand out in this big mess of technology, which is very impersonal, right? So if they are sending the resume through the internet, if they're talking through email, if they are interacting through Zoom, they're more learning how to manage the technical part rather than their personal part. Right? Mm-hmm. So which sort of builds our what we call as the quality of a character. But with so much things happening in technology, where big companies, I work for a very big company, right? So they have this AI tool which just picks up the resume. That's the unfortunate thing, right? So that's the unfortunate truth. So the youngsters now, when we give them credible personal skills, how do they sort of move ahead with the technology in the world?
You deal a lot with that.
So the question is, how do they present themselves, even though the personal nature of the job search is sort of.
So how does our old world philosophy or the Greek philosophy, or Thales philosophy, how do we stand in this world where everything is decided by AI or technology?
Yeah. Well, I think first I might push back on that just a little bit on the AI question. First, I think, and correct me if I'm going down the wrong path, but I think first you can, just like writing a resume for the audience that you want to read it, you should present yourself on all the digital fronts as you want your potential employer to see it. So first of all, if you're on social media, do less of it. It's not going to really help you a lot. Now, in terms of your professional search, LinkedIn might be helpful to you in some ways because they have a pretty strong job search engine, and it is a good place to figure out where other people work. I think you present yourself in as professionally as possible. Just like in the resume, focus on showing people what you've actually accomplished, not just what you've done. And I think so. I read about some of these automated resume reviewers, and I think I know that does happen at big companies. But there are ways to beat that process, and one of the ways to beat it is by using some really rigorous syntax when you're writing your resume, which is basically I did X for the purpose of Y using Z tools, or with Z result, and making sure that you're giving the employer everything that they're looking for, and that you're hitting all the high points. If you can keep your resume clean and tight and well written, and that's not 6 pages long with a bunch of nonsense on it, you'll probably get through that initial resume process.
Simple.
And then you are dealing with a human being. I think we're using AI in a lot of ways. We're using a lot of automated technology, but ultimately, it's going to come down to a person. And that's the other thing. Remember that statistic I mentioned? Or maybe you didn't hear that. Was 85% of jobs are filled through referrals and through personal networks. So even though there's a lot of resume tracking and automation, ultimately most of these jobs come down to who knows who.
Yep.
One of my professors in law school always liked to tell this job that before he even went to law school, he got a summer job. He got a summer job as a courier at a law firm, and every day he used to stay late and he would clean up the bar. Like the lawyers would come in, they have their drinks, and he would go and clean up the bar. And the partners of the firm would come back in the next day and they'd have this perfectly clean bar. Well, the managing partner of that firm remembered him 10 years later, maybe it's 12 years later, as the kid that would always clean up the bar. And after he graduated law school, he said, "I would love to have you here because I know that you busted your rear end." So yeah, I think ultimately most jobs really do come down to that personal relationship. Yeah. So despite the technology, I think pursue relationships as aggressively as you can.
Absolutely. I just reinforce that. I mean, there's every profession, there's an association or many associations, and they love to have young people involved. Student sections. I mean, you don't have to be in a big college to start your own section for whatever profession you want to be in. They always call. You go to conferences, they have reduced rates, they'll put you in important jobs. You're going to be dealing with senior professionals in that area, and things happen. I always tell young people that want to apply for specific jobs, says, all right, you first got to get past the gatekeeper. That's the HR department. You've got to figure out, like Alex was saying, what job do you want, who's in charge of it, how do you get to them? And generally, like they say, what is it? Everyone is connected to everyone through 5 people, or something like that, right? Yeah. And there's a lot of truth to that. But if you get engaged in one of these professional associations, that just shortcuts it even more. And trust me, they are thrilled to have young people involved in their activities. And it's the same for hobbies. I mean, my kids used to race cars. If you go to a NASA or an SCCA race event, they got a whole program just for the youth. You get to drive free, you get to help, you got to help. And everyone wants to help young people. That's the way you get past it.
It's true.
Yeah,
it's true.
Humans. And companies are nothing more than a collection of human beings. Doesn't matter how much AI they use.
Thank you very much for your question.
Thank you very much for coming, and greatly appreciate Mr. Misegades and Mr. Guin. You probably received the best advice you're going to get in your lifetime in regards to these subjects, so we're greatly appreciative